Mark and Sarah had set out into the woods that afternoon, eager to collect wild berries they'd heard about from an old local. The old man had spoken of the berries with a twinkle in his eye, describing their unique taste and the adventure of finding them deep within the forest. Intrigued and excited, the couple decided to make a day of it, packing a small picnic and setting off with high spirits. The woods were vast, with towering oaks whose branches formed a thick canopy overhead. The trees seemed ancient, their gnarled roots twisting and turning through the earth like the veins of the forest itself. The deeper they ventured, the more they felt enveloped by the natural beauty and mystery of the place. At first the air smelled sweet, filled with the fragrance of pine and earth, and the sun filtered down in soft beams. The light danced on the forest floor, creating a serene and almost magical atmosphere. Birds chirped melodiously, and the occasional rustle of small animals added to the symphony of the woods. They laughed as they filled their baskets, unaware of how quickly the time passed. The joy of discovery and the simple pleasure of being together in such a beautiful setting made the hours fly by. They shared stories, reminisced about old times, and made plans for the future, all while savouring the sweet taste of the berries they found. But as the sun began to sink behind the trees, a chill crept into the air. The golden hues of the sunset cast long shadows, and the once vibrant forest began to take on a more ominous tone. The temperature dropped noticeably, and the cheerful sounds of the forest grew quieter, replaced by an eerie stillness. The once comforting rustle of the leaves became unnerving, and the woods seemed to grow darker faster than they expected. The shadows lengthened, and the familiar path they had been following seemed to shift and change, as if the forest itself was alive and intent on confusing them. "We should head back," Sarah whispered, her voice tight. The playful excitement in her eyes had been replaced by a look of concern. She clutched her basket tightly, her knuckles white against the darkening backdrop of the forest. Mark nodded, glancing at his watch. The hands seemed to move slower, as if time itself was being manipulated by the forest. He tried to reassure Sarah with a smile, but the unease in his own heart made it difficult. It was only 4:30, but it felt much later. The oppressive darkness and the sudden drop in temperature made it seem like night had already fallen. The couple quickened their pace, hoping to find their way back before it became too dark to see. As they walked, the path they'd been following began to twist and turn in ways they didn't remember. The familiar landmarks they had noted earlier were nowhere to be seen, replaced by unfamiliar terrain that seemed to close in around them. The familiar landmarks disappeared, replaced by thick, gnarled trees and creeping vines. The forest seemed to be playing tricks on them, leading them deeper into its heart rather than towards the safety of the edge. A strange sound echoed through the forest, something between a growl and a low guttural hum. It was a sound that didn't belong to any animal they knew, and it sent a shiver down their spines. Sarah froze, clutching Mark's arm. "Did you hear that?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with fear. Mark nodded, his eyes scanning the darkening forest for any sign of movement. The shadows cast by the rising moon stretched long and thin, creating shapes that danced in their peripheral vision. Every flicker of movement seemed to be something sinister lurking just out of sight. Every crunch of their footsteps seemed amplified, followed by what sounded like something heavier walking just out of sight. The sense of being followed grew stronger with each step, and the couple's fear turned into full-blown panic. The air was thick, now smelling of decay and damp earth, and the wind that had once been gentle now howled through the trees. The once inviting forest had transformed into a nightmarish landscape, filled with unseen dangers. Panic set in as the couple began to run, crashing through the undergrowth. Their breaths came in ragged gasps and their hearts pounded in their chests as they tried to escape the unseen terror that pursued them. The sounds of snapping branches and heavy breathing echoed behind them, though they dared not look back. The fear of what they might see kept them moving forward, driven by pure adrenaline. The noises grew closer, a deep, inhuman grunt mixed with wet, panting breaths. It was a sound that spoke of something ancient and malevolent, something that had no place in the world of the living. They were no longer alone. The presence of something dark and sinister was palpable, and it seemed to be closing in on them with every passing second. Suddenly they burst through the tree line, collapsing on the grass at the edge of the woods. The relief of escaping the forest was overwhelming, and they lay there, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and fear. The growling stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving them breathless and shaken. The silence that followed was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. They made it back to town, but they would never forget the sensation of being hunted in the dark woods. The experience had left a mark on them, a lingering fear that would haunt their dreams for years to come. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost in the woods? Beware, stay vigilant, because there are terrifying creatures in the woods that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. The warning echoed in their minds, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Your support helps us bring you more tales of terror and suspense. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles if you dare.